have I seen Nightreign? Ludo, I've played way too much of it, and at first I was torn, but after fully completing it, I'll be honest, it might now be one of my favourite Souls things, which is odd. Because at face value, it seems like a weird copycat blend of other popular genres, but as I've mentioned in other videos, the very one before this actually, needlessly adhering to genre conventions without understanding exactly why those games did the things they did in the first place is a dangerous game to play. Ironically, most famously seen with the Souls-like genre, with devs attempting to copy FromSoft, but now it's FromSoft's turn. A huge perk of making more money than God on your best-selling game is that it affords your developers time to experiment. A lot of people view Nightreign as this weird cash grab asset flip of FromSoft's own work, which is kind of warranted. The game is built upon years of development of weapon sets, boss designs and animations, but instead of using them as a way to regurgitate member berries, they've utilized them as a springboard to combine a bunch of genre conventions into something wholly unique. Because when you boil it down, this game is a multiplayer, roguelike, battle royale, Souls-like, and in combination that sounds revolting. But if you only take the tiny individual elements that work from each of these genres and bring them together, it can create something beautiful. So let's take a look at these design abductions. First of all, with multiplayer. So FromSoft has a contentious relationship with multiplayer in general. Not only does half its audience think you're playing the game wrong if you summon friends or NPCs to help you, but also doing so is more complex than getting a mortgage on an interdimensional bungalow. Inviting your friends to play with you is like pulling teeth. But I'm happy to announce that they have finally implemented lobbies and Steam integration into Nightreign, making the whole ordeal much smoother, which was needed because this game, more than any previously, hinges on its multiplayer functionality. The sheer amount of enemies and even their designs rely on there being multiple players, best illustrated by the Cerberus cosplayer. Not only does it rapidly switch targets to keep all players on their toes, it has intermission phases where it splits into 3 separate entities for the players to fight individually, and their core attack patterns are also designed to inflict damage in an AoE around them to engage all players at once in dodge timings, regardless of the boss's main focus, and I think this is a vast improvement on what we've seen previously. And this can only be done because of the game's entire multiplayer focus. But these are just improvements on previous designs with a new focus. But what did Nightreign directly take from outside genres? Well, from roguelikes, it took a few things, namely permadeath, power creep, and randomized loot. They maintain their usual Souls ecosystem of dropping your resources on death that you need to retrieve, but added permadeath during key boss battles, putting an emphasis on preparing for those encounters rather than repeatedly attempting them. This preparation is reinforced by its inclusion of permanent upgrades obtained during each run that can give you a greater chance of success through this slow power creep. And finally, they took one of the most famous aspects of roguelike design, which is randomized loot and power-ups. Well, no, it's not the only genre to incorporate random loot. Battle royales, for example, do the same thing to keep their matches constantly fresh, but I think it can be a crutch to force variety in a frustrating way. The only aspect of battle royale design I think convincingly pushes players to new and interesting gameplay encounters is how its encircling ring of death literally pushes players to change how they approach each combat encounter due to its varied final locations. Nightreign incorporates this with its ever-present threat of its titular Nightreign. But the difference here is that in battle royales, the map may shrink to force this variety, but the layout is always the same, meaning the player can target specific areas to try and get an advantage, eventually making matches more formulaic. Nightreign, apart from some key areas such as the central castle, all camps, ruins, mage towers and bosses are procedurally distributed each run. This combined with the random loot and encircling danger makes for an incredibly unique and fast-paced experience. Sounds bloody chaotic. Well, yeah, true, it is to begin with at least, but the more you play, you start to see its hidden consistencies. Just like with Elden Ring attempting to manage its open world, Nightreign uses its thematic regularity to quickly denote the rewards present in any structure you spot. Churches will always have additional flasks inside, shacks will always contain holy weapons, and the castle will always contain a great boss in its dungeons and at its peak. And this is also signified on the map itself. Depending on what type of damage element a camp has that you can see on the map, you can then deduce exactly what bosses will spawn there and then their potential rewards, meaning you can stack the deck in your favour depending on the paths and locations you decide to tackle, giving you a better chance of overcoming your chosen Night Lords and using their weaknesses against them. Because of this, there is a huge amount of planning involved in making a run successful here, and this is in stark contrast to what we see in battle royales. Yes, the pressure of the death circle coming in stages will alter your strategy, but because of the pure randomness of weapon distribution in battle royales, your route is simplified to figuring out what its final destination will be and then planning for that. When this is combined with the power creep nature of roguelikes with direct, targetable upgrades, this makes your planned routes hit specific areas, making the planning itself a lot more engaging. Yeah, exactly. It's quite literally not about the final destination itself, but the journey. Each match is unique, not just in the sense of the items and powers you'll obtain, but also the routes and strategies you'll employ. Most of this is done through the map. There are guiding lines to how the procedurally placed camps are laid out to encourage this chaining of them together, but the game also naturally leads you to the unique paths of progression visually, using the same motive design I've explored in my previous Elden Ring episodes, using vantage and verticality to frame motives to progress simply through its level design. If we want to get even more granular about this, it's even done with individual enemy placements. Here, at the edge of the volcano, directly opposite the church where most players will attempt to go, there are these enemies that are placed at the cliff's edge. And it just so happens that directly below these enticing enemies, the hidden path to the volcano's secrets is located. These enemies were strategically placed to draw the player in a certain direction, so this progression into the volcano itself feels player motivated. Volcano, yeah, I guess that was a bit of a leap. After defeating specific Night Lords, the map is altered for a time, introducing radical changes to the world. Venturing into these new areas poses unique challenges, and finding the secret within them can give powerful rewards, but at the cost of time and added difficulty. Luckily, at the start of day 2 of any run, the circle will always end within these challenge areas, allowing players to plan for them from the outset. More consistency, but regardless of this freedom to plan, the stark difference in the pacing at which Nightreign is played in comparison to the other FromSoft titles has also meant that they've had to adjust how their mechanics interact. This can be as small as healing and FP restoration happening as you approach a site of grace automatically with no interaction cost needed, or as big as a massive, sweeping changes to entire classes to make them work better within these contexts. And you know what also uses classes to construct its games? Today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by GameMaker. If you've ever wanted to get into game development, GameMaker does this really crazy thing where it's free. Just start making and only pay when you want to release your game to the world commercially.
It's fast, it's user-friendly, and there's easy-to-follow tutorials, plus a dedicated community to help answer even my questions. How make man jump? GameMaker is a 2D game engine that's helped bring some of yours and my favorite recent experiences to life, like UFO 50, Chicory, Anton Blast, and of course, Yahtzee's own Starstruck Vagabond.
Ooh, we talking about GameMaker? I love that program, it's so easy to use. As well as Starstruck Vagabond, I also used it to make all 12 projects in my 12 games in 12 months Dev Diary challenge. And I couldn't believe how much sex I got out of that. None. I got none at all. Which I couldn't believe.
So what are you waiting for? Head on over to the GameMaker link in the description and start cracking away today, because we want to play your game.
Yeah, looking through this list, I'm seeing one of you made Armpit Fart Tycoon, and I've got several questions for you. Wait, what did I mean by using classes? Well, it's a game dev joke. Admittedly, only a handful of people are going to get it. I guess that would make it a bad joke. Well, anyway, yeah, classes. A bit odd to go from a formula that was famous for allowing players to experiment with weapons and armor choices to a game with a select handful of classes to choose from, but I honestly think it works extremely well in this context. For example, building a mage has always been viewed as a way to kind of cheese the game via ranged attacks, and this was countered by giving spellcasters a limited resource to cast their spells and the flask to refill it shared slots with healing flasks, meaning even though you're a cheesy boy, you have fewer chances to make mistakes because of that. Now, Nightreign's pacing doesn't permit those designs. They don't really work here, so they've implemented a way for players to gain mana back from enemies via the Recluse's ability. All classes come with a base ability and ultimate, and the Recluse's draws FP out of a targeted enemy if they have been recently struck by non-physical damage, meaning to gain more FP, the player first needs to expel it, and then make a conscious decision to use the ability to gain it back, but in the process putting themselves in a vulnerable animation. This adds a lot more nuance to the class as a whole and allows them to have their own weaknesses while at the same time allowing them to keep up with their melee counterparts. Another playstyle impacted by these redesigns are the archers. Now, bows exist in previous Souls games, many of them in fact, but doing a bow-centric build has always been finicky and cumbersome due to the low damage output and reliance on crafting and collecting unique ammunition. This wouldn't work here, so the Iron Eye class has had their ammo count completely removed. So to better balance them for having infinite ranged ammo, FromSoft have given them a rather intense damage fall-off at greater distances, encouraging players to stay within a certain range, which coincidentally matches enemy aggro and attack ranges. This is encouraged further by Iron Eye's mark ability, which dashes them through enemies, slashing them with a dagger and marking them for increased damage, meaning to play optimally, you have to get into the same level of danger as melee players. Along with this, the charged weapon FP attacks that do considerably more damage than just spamming basic arrows also places your character in these lengthy animations mirroring the mage's same setback. Does this make it too easy? Well, let's look at another redesign of something that hardcore fans deem too easy in Elden Ring with spirit summons. Now, as anyone who's played Terraria with me knows, I adore summoners in games, and as much as I've tried, making a dedicated summoner build in Elden Ring is practically impossible. But in Nightreign, there's a hidden character you can unlock that can summon 3 different spirit summons to help them in battle. There are no FP costs to do this, you can cycle between all 3 of them at any time and can do so infinitely as long as they have had time to regen their health. And sounds a little bit OP, right? Well, there are a few things they've done to attempt to balance this out. Each summon is only useful in specific scenarios. Helen is nimble and useful in single target. Frederick is slow but attacks in AoE. Sebastian, mate, he's completely immobile but can stun smaller enemies and stagger bosses. Each one has its own strengths and mismanaging them dramatically diminishes their usefulness. Along with this, the Revenant has one of the lowest dodge distances and health pools to make this class more about creating and managing space for you and your allies with your summons, making it a really unique playstyle. I completely adore all 3 of these classes, but to be honest, any and all of these selectable characters have their unique uses and are insanely fun to play. Also, small tangent, can I just say how immensely appreciative I am that Nightreign has skins and you get them from just playing and completing the game, because damn, can someone call a plumber because my boy is trippy. This class system works beautifully, but that's not to say that having classes is better than what came before, but all of this has insane implications for the future of From Software design. I'm willing to bet money that we'll be seeing these uses of archery, magic and summoning come back in future FromSoft titles, and this level of speed, freedom and having more viable builds and higher focus on multiplayer has honestly given me a lot of hope for their PvE switch to exclusive Duskbloods, which I was kinda lukewarm on beforehand. All in all, I think it's actually insane that Nightreign even exists. It shouldn't be possible with how this industry is functioning at the moment. And taking a massive AAA company that is arguably famous for doing the same thing over and over, and then have them produce an experimental game combining the best parts of 3 different genres and somehow having it all come together, breaking the molds of their own decades-old designs to improve upon them, this doesn't happen in AAA. Ever, and indies don't have the budget to do something like this on this scale. This entire game is a design anomaly, and I think that should be applauded. This game shouldn't exist in this current climate, but I'm sure glad it does. But what do you think? Do you think the redesigns of the FromSoft formula are a net positive, or do you believe that the class designs take away from the mechanical and fashion Souls freedoms the previous designs afforded? Let us know down below, because we would love to discuss this with you. Oi, Ludes, I just checked and I saw that you're not in the Second Wind Patreon. And can I tell you, Missy, that you are missing out. We have Patreon Hangout movie nights, we have exclusive experimental videos, and a bunch of other goodies that you could be involved in, but I guess you're too busy with, I don't know, not having thumbs. Well, yeah, that is fair. You do work here too. Okay, yeah, I'll get you added to that after this. All right, time to say goodbye, Ludo. All right, bye, guys.